Meanwhile, King Verence, monarch of Lancre, was making a discovery. Like most people at any rate below the age of 60 or so, Verence hadn't exercised his mind much about what happened to you when you died. Like most people since the dawn of time, he assumed it all somehow worked out all right in the end. And, like most people since the dawn of time, he was now dead. He was in fact lying at the bottom of one of his own stairways in Lancre Castle, with a dagger in his back. He sat up, and was surprised to find that while someone he was certainly inclined to think of as himself was sitting up, something very much like his body remained lying on the floor. It was a pretty good body, incidentally, now that he came to see it from outside for the first time. He had always been quite attached to it, although he had to admit this did not now seem to be the case. It was big and well-muscled. He'd looked after it. He'd allowed it a mustache and long flowing locks. He'd seen it got plenty of healthy outdoor exercise and lots of red meat. Now, just when a body would have been useful, it had let him down, or out. On top of that, he had to come to terms with a tall, thin figure standing beside him. Most of it was hidden in a hooded black robe, but the one arm which extended from the folds to grip a large scythe was made of bone. When one is dead, there are things one instinctively recognizes.
"Hello!"
Verence drew himself up to his full height, or what would have been his full height if that part of him which the word height could have been applied was not lying stiff on the floor and facing a future in which only the word depth could be appropriate.
"I am a king, mark you," he said.
"Was, your majesty."
"What?"
Verence barked.
"I said was. It's called the past tense. You'll soon get used to it."
The tall figure tapped its calcareous fingers on the scythe's handle. It was obviously upset about something.
"If it comes to that,"
Verence thought,
"so am I."
But the various broad hints available in his present circumstances were breaking through even the mad-brained stupidity that made up most of his character, and it was dawning on him that whatever kingdom he might currently be in, he wasn't king of it.
"Are you Death, fellow?" he ventured.
"I have many names."
"Which one are you using at present?"
said Verence, with a shade more deference. There were people milling around them. In fact, quite a few people were milling through them like ghosts.
"Oh, so it was Felmet,"
the king added vaguely, looking at the figure lurking with obscene delight at the top of the stairs.
"My father said I should never let him get behind me. Why don't I feel angry?"
"Glands,"
said Death shortly.
"Adrenaline and so forth, and emotions. You don't have them. All you have now is thought."
The tall figure appeared to reach a decision.
"This is very irregular,"
he went on, apparently to himself.
"However, who am I to argue?"
"Who indeed?"
"What?"
"I said who indeed."
"Shut up."
Death stood with his skull on one side, as though listening to some inner voice. As his hood fell away, the late king noticed that Death resembled a polished skeleton in every way but one. His eye sockets glowed sky blue. Verence wasn't frightened, however, not simply because it is difficult to be in fear of anything when the bits you need to be frightened with are curdling several yards away, but because he had never really been frightened of anything in his life, and wasn't going to start now. This was partly because he didn't have the imagination, but he was also one of those rare individuals who are totally focused in time. Most people aren't. They live their lives as a sort of temporal blur around the point where their body actually is, anticipating the future or holding on to the past. They're usually so busy thinking about what happens next that the only time they ever find out what is happening now is when they come to look back on it. Most people are like this. They learn how to fear because they can actually tell, down at the subconscious level, what is going to happen next. It's already happening to them. But Verence had always lived for the present. Until now, anyway. Death sighed.
"Ha! I suppose no one mentioned anything to you," he hazarded.
"Say again?"
"No premonitions?" Strange dreams? Mad old soothsayers shouting things at you in the street?
About what? Dying?
No, I suppose not. It would be too much to expect,
said Death sourly.
They leave it all to me.
Who do? Said Verence, mystified.
Fate, destiny, all the rest of them.
Death laid a hand on the king's shoulder.
The fact is, I'm afraid you're due to become a ghost.
Oh. He looked down at his body, which seemed solid enough. Then someone walked through him.
Don't let it upset you.
Verence watched his own stiff corpse being carried reverently from the hall.
I'll try, he said.
Good man.
I don't think I will be up to all that business with the white sheets and the chains, though, he said. Do I have to walk around moaning and screaming?
Death shrugged.
Do you want to?
No.
Then I shouldn't bother if I were you.
Death pulled an hourglass from the recesses of his dark robe and inspected it closely.
And now I really must be going,
he said. He turned on his heel, put his scythe over his shoulder, and started to walk out of the hall through the wall.
I say, hold on there,
shouted Verence, running after him. Death didn't look back. Verence followed him through the wall. It was like walking through fog.
Is that all? He demanded. I mean, how long will I be a ghost? Why am I a ghost? You can't just leave me like this.
He halted and raised an imperious, slightly transparent finger.
Stop! I command you!
Death shook his head gloomily and stepped through the next wall. The king hurried after him with as much dignity as he could still muster, and found Death fiddling with the girths of a large white horse standing on the battlements. It was wearing a nosebag.
You can't leave me like this, he repeated,
in the face of the evidence. Death turned to him.
I can,
he said.
You're undead, you see. Ghosts inhabit a world between the living and the dead. It's not my responsibility.
He patted the king on the shoulder.
Don't worry,
he said.
It won't be forever.
Good.
It may seem like forever.
How long will it really be?
Until you have fulfilled your destiny, I assume.
And how will I know what my destiny is?
Said the king desperately.
Can't help you there, I'm sorry.
Well, how can I find out?
These things generally become apparent, I understand,
said Death, and swung himself into the saddle.
And until then I have to haunt this place.
King Verence stared around at the drafty battlements.
All alone, I suppose. Won't anyone be able to see me?
Oh, the physically inclined, close relatives, and cats, of course.
I hate cats.
Death's face became a little stiffer, if that were possible. The blue glow in his eye sockets flickered red for an instant.
I see,
he said. The tone suggested that Death was too good for cat haters.
You like great big dogs, I imagine.
As a matter of fact, I do.
The king stared gloomily at the dawn. His dogs. He'd really miss his dogs. And it looked like such a good hunting day. He wondered if ghosts hunted. Almost certainly not, he imagined. Or ate, or drank either, for that matter. And that was really depressing. He liked a big, noisy banquet and had quaffed, quaffing is like drinking, but you spill more, many a pint of good ale. And bad ale, come to that. He'd never been able to tell the difference till the following morning, usually. He kicked despondently at a stone and noted gloomily that his foot went right through it. No hunting, drinking, carousing. No wassailing, no hawking. It was dawning on him that the pleasures of the flesh were pretty sparse without the flesh. Suddenly life wasn't worth living. The fact that he wasn't living it didn't cheer him up at all.
Some people like to be ghosts,
said Death. Said Verence gloomily.
It's not such a wrench, I assume. They can see how their descendants get on. Sorry, Is something the matter?"
But Verence had vanished into the wall.
"Don't mind me, will you?"
said Death peevishly. He looked around him with a gaze that could see through time and space and the souls of men, and noted a landslide in distant Clatch, a hurricane in Hawondaland, a plague in Hergen.
"Busy, busy,"
he muttered, and spurred his horse into the sky.